Hi, I'm Melinda Donley, and I'm going to talk to you about Yuri Bronfenbrenner's bioecological model theory, how it impacts us as educators, and how it kind of turned the world on its head when in the world of child development. Okay, so Yuri Bronfenbrenner came up with this theory of bioecological model back in the 1960s and 70s. So the idea of it is that everything in a child's world, whether they directly interact with the child or not, has an impact on the child's development. So, the reason this was so revolutionary was prior to this, different scientists in different areas would study different areas and nobody interacted with each other or thought about how their areas overlap. So, you would have a child psychologist that would study an individual child in some sort of lab setting. You would have an anthropologist that might study society, but not how that impacts the child. You might have an economist that studies the framework of the society, but not how that impacts the child. So Bronfenbrenner proposed that all of it impacts child development. Okay, so his model is made in a series of concentric circles that widen out. So you start in the middle with your microsystem. That's where your child's at, and the child's microsystem involves people that interact directly face to face with the child. They have a back and forth relationship. So that's going to be the child's parents, that's going to be teachers, possibly neighbors, friends, grandparents, anybody that the child is in contact with on a regular basis where they interact back and forth, and it's a reciprocal relationship. Okay, so from the microsystem, you widen out to the mesosystem, and that's where the people in the child's microsystem interact with each other, therefore impacting the child. So that's going to be parents talking to teachers, like at a parent-teacher conference, or neighbors visiting with the parents. I mean, different things like that, but especially pertinent to educators, it's going to be our relationship with a child's parents, decisions we may make together that then impact the child, even though the child was not directly involved or at the meeting or something like that. Okay, so after the mesosystem, then you go out into the exosystem, okay? And that is where you have relationships that inadvertently impact the child, like a parent's relationship with their boss. So if the parent gets in a fight with the boss at work, puts the parent in a bad mood, the parent comes home, they're short-tempered with their child, and they end up yelling at their child, and so then the child comes to school in a bad mood or sad. That is where something in the child's exosystem has inadvertently affected the child and their possible development, depending on how long-term that is. Okay, so then after the exosystem, then you have the macrosystem, and that's society and culture as a whole, okay, and how that impacts child development. Okay, so how does that impact us as educators? What does that have to do with us in teaching kids? All right, so first of all, there's the obvious, the microsystem. We interact with the child, okay, so we can use that interaction for good or for evil. So we need to be cognizant of that. And even if we feel like losing our temper, we shouldn't. We've all had those bad teachers that affected us. We don't need to be those bad teachers. And being in a child's microsystem, we will have direct effect on a child's development. Okay, so now in the mesosystem, that's where we're going to interact with the child's parents or primary caregivers, okay? So we need to try as best we can to have good communication with a child's parents or caregivers, because decisions that are made are going to affect the child. And as we all know, a child's overall schooling is going to impact their development through life. Okay, so we need to always think about that when we are interacting with people in the child's world. Now, in the exosystem, there's a couple different ways that can affect us as educators. First of all, there's our relationship with administrators in the school. So decisions that are made or how we interact with our colleagues, how we maybe talk about that child, can affect the treatment of that child or decisions made about that child. There is also in the exosystem things like parent loses their job. Okay, so that's in the child's world, but the child was not there. They didn't necessarily go to that workplace or know anybody in that workplace, but the parent losing their job affects the child. Okay, so that's the exosystem and things that we need to be aware of as teachers, which is why it's very important to always know what's going on in our students' lives, because it can help explain behaviors, emotions, attitudes, things like that, if we know what's going on outside of school. Okay, then the last one, the macro system, that's culture and society. The biggest area that we educators need to be aware of with the macro system is our English language learners, those students who are either immigrants themselves or whose family maintains strong cultural ties. They may be raised differently than what we are used to, and that may affect learning in the classroom, how they interact with other students in the classroom, their attitudes towards us. So if we do have students of different cultures in our class, it would behoove us as teachers to learn about their culture so we can interact with them in a more intelligent way and not expect them to just automatically conform to being a white American or whatever is the majority where you teach. Okay, so that is how Bronfenbrenner's bioecological model theory is important to us as educators.